Morning, I'm Neota Igbe.
Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. My name is Ayo Makinde. Just to let you know, today is September 11. Yes, it's that day. Welcome to the show.
Okay, yeah.
That day.
What day?
That day. What happened on that day, Ayo?
Oh, okay. This day, that day.
This day, that day, Ayo. What happened on that day, September 11? How many years ago? 100 years? 200 years? 10 years ago? Because I have something else that's bothering me, Ayo, and that has to do with the question of security. How secure are those who are supposed to be securing us over the weekend? And of late, hear stories of policemen, soldiers, security personnel in their homes, sometimes just going about their business, just gone down for a reason. Latest being that of, I think, the River State, a DPO that was shot. That was killed, rather. I'm not sure that was true, but he was killed. What struck me is the fact that the community came out to celebrate him. So hardly would you, in Nigeria, and in certain quarters in Nigeria, hardly would you see people come out to celebrate a policeman. Hardly. But when they do, they don't celebrate them, but they demand a lot. I mean, do your job, protect us and all. They hardly celebrate them. But in this case, the community came out to celebrate him and reached out to the government to say, no, you need to find the person that, or the people that killed this man. So he tells me that man must have been doing something right. And it's a call to others who think that, hey, I mean, I'm wearing the uniform, so it's an opportunity for me to flex my muscle and show the people that I have authority. No, it's an opportunity for you to serve the people. And when you do serve, the truth is, yesterday, just in passing, my daughter said something, said, I noticed that you were talking to somebody and said that person is a very friendly person. Just a few minutes came there, everybody is talking to him. And it struck me that every human being actually desires to be, one, acknowledged and spoken to, because that's our nature. We're created to. So if you are serving, know that the people that you're serving would also want to be able to relate with you, especially if you're there to protect them. They might have information you will need that would also protect you. And so kudos to, and our hearts go out to the family of that DPO in River State and many others who might have lost their life in one way or the other. And let's see what we can do to get those that did this to face the law. But hey, if those securing us are insecure, where do we go?
Well, it's a touching one this morning, and you know, by the way, it speaks to what I hinted at concerning September 11, 9/11. I'm pretty sure you remember right now the attack on the Twin Towers and the yeoman's job that security agencies and officials of government in the U.S. did at that time. Quite a number of years ago now, 2001, if I remember correctly. But to the issue that he just raised now, it's always been a concern for me. You know, guys, you would know that I always talk about not just the fact that these gentlemen in security agencies have their work cut out for them, but that their welfare is paramount. If we are going to get the kind of services we should get from them, then we should secure them in any way that we can. Forgive me, Auntie. I saw the story, but it's just one of those things that I hate to even learn much about. But just as you said, a good number of those things are happening all over the nation. The question that we want to ask is, when we send these people out, when we put these people in the line of danger, are we doing anything indeed to protect them? If anything happens, God forbid, to these people, do we have anything prepared for them to protect them? And you know, last week we spoke at various times on the importance of giving information to security agencies. We do give, when people get information across to security agencies? Do the people themselves feel secure? And there will be no reprisals. Remember that happened, what happened along the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway, some communities in that area that preferred bandits to protect them as opposed to security agencies. And we also heard all kinds of things that the Chief of Defense Staff, the previous Chief of Defense Staff did to, in his own way, manage the situation so that there are no longer attacks in that route. So what are the steps we need to take? What are the things that we need to do as a people to ensure that we secure that people community partnership in a way that will protect our personnel and ensure our safety and security at all times. Remember also that we spoke about the need to protect the borders through our consultations and conversations with the various communities. It's an all-encompassing thing. I'm just hoping that this will give us some good thinking and ensure that not just are these people protected by the law, not just are they protected by the police, but they are protected by the welfare facilities that have been made available to them, and they're also protected by the people, giving information and trusting security agencies enough to do the needful for them. It's a long walk. Let me just hope that we're on the path. Kimberly.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, absolutely so. So it's really tough. And then, yes, there are several other stories which we will highlight for you, which are not quite related to ensuring that we focus on the right things in terms of making sure that we keep good tabs on security and provide the requisite, the necessary equipment and policies and strategy to ensure that everyone, at least to a very, very large extent, are safe. So, yeah, unfortunately, as a matter of fact, over the weekend, shock in Morocco, nobody saw that coming, the earthquake that happened over there. And so it just gets lots of people thinking, wow, if that's happening here in Africa, where next? I mean, are we in that belt? So several questions really. Means much as the country is grappling with so many things, we also need to ensure that we look out and see that, look, if, I know people say, look, far be it, so also was it, I mean, did they also say that they didn't expect that it was going to be there, but look, the world is grappling with different things. Well, that said, we'll come back. Let's just go right ahead and take you through some of the dailies this morning. And it's Nigerian Tribune. We're starting with, I guess, the Supreme Court's, I beg your pardon, the Court of Appeal decision still in the minds of many over the presidential election petition court. So I don't know if the reactions will entirely go away anytime soon, but look at that, the bishops speaking up this morning. I know you may want to read that story and see, okay, what context is this one? So it's about that presidential election. Don't bend the law, Catholic bishops tell Supreme Court. So, because the presidents there have said we will go to the Supreme Court. Now, if they say don't bend the law, you know, you look at this and you feel, are they expecting it to go in a particular way? Well, the thing about this is you never know what the pendulum will swing. So are they also speaking in that context? Just do what it is. Just
do what needs to be done and let it be seen that justice has been.
Can it really be seen to have been done by those who lose?
Well,
so, I don't know. It's something that might be up for debate. But look at the other right. Oh, and by the way, the court decision too, concerning the Imo member House of Rep, Gochini, also made the rounds over the weekend, and how many wondered, how in the world could that ever happen? When if he says, look, Supreme Court had decided on that pre-election matter, and then you come back and then conduct fresh elections, and then he should not participate in that election. And you wonder, on the face of it, you ask yourself, what is going on?
I saw that, and someone asked the question, does the lower court have the power to overturn a decision by the Supreme Court? Hey, lawyers will have to explain that to us.
I look at the other one here. Say politicians using palliatives distribution to enrich themselves. It's a narrative which it was a thing some time ago. Remember when a lot of these things were in the warehouses, people broke into them, some of them had expired. Only God knows why many of them, those authorities kept them in those warehouses. And now, if they're saying politicians are using the palliative to enrich themselves, this is a road we don't want to travel again. Because if there's a lot of hue and cry out for the federal government, the state government to ensure people get palliatives because they still need to grapple with the effects of having to buy fuel at 500, 6, 17 per liter. And then if you're supposed to give them a little bit, and now you're reported that they're using it to enrich themselves. And they're rich enough already. What more would you want to enrich yourself with? So that's what you see here on the front page of Nigerian Tribune.
And what I have is leadership, and writing on the back of that story as well. It says at leadership Twitter spaces, stakeholders absolve judges, blame ninth NAS for Atiku Obi's loss at tribunal. So I guess attention shifting now to the National Assembly over that matter. There's electoral acts drafted to provide escape route for manipulators. Modibo. Don't transfer anger to judges, says ex-PDP legal advisor. Verdict reaffirms confidence in judiciary. APC ex-senators.
When they blame stakeholders, I mean, yes, you need to read the story to put it in proper context. You always ask yourself, okay, they passed the law. Everybody, most people at least, were happy about it. We also look at the loopholes there. There were several lawyers there. So were lawyers part of the stakeholders who blame NAS? If they passed it, did we identify those lacuna or the loopholes and say, listen, these are the areas that need to be adjusted? Well, if we didn't and we're not doing now, all right, bring them up, take them to the 10th NAS, let them do what they have to do or what you want them to do.
As someone said, it looks like every election cycle is an opportunity for the electoral acts to be looked at and you want to work.
Yeah, but in spite of all that opportunity, how confident are the people to go into elections?
I usually will say it this way: as the simple things we do, go to a POS to withdraw money. You can go to a POS machine, someone by the roadside, and say, transfer this amount to that person, submit your card. The person does that, and you walk away without bothering to check is it done or is it not done. You're sure that your money will get to where you wanted it to get to. Our country have simple processes by election.
And in Lagos or in several other states, if you have to renew your papers, if you skip 1 year or 2 years, whenever you go, they get you to do all of those things. So they got the figures, they got all of those properties sorted out, but they can't get it right for elections.
So the question is, what's wrong with our election processes that continues to be like a...
If it's revenue, don't make any mistake about it. They will make sure they get as much revenue as possible.
And these things are even down to the rural communities. We know they say, we're not ready for electronic voting yet. But you can do transactions in the deepest of villages as far as there's a POS. I think there are some things some people are not saying to us. But hey, let's go back to the leadership newspaper here. So there's a story above that. Ondo Wayakedodu returned from medical trip. Why? He's okay. He looks better, from the pictures we saw. Well, go to page 7 and read up on that story, why he returned. And then this one has to do with business. Despite business headwinds, 7 banks declare 878.3 billion profit in first half of the year. But those stories about the police, the DPO, 6 suspects arrested in Rivers already over the death of the DPO. And then this one that happened over the weekend, or last week basically, organ harvest suspect goes berserk in police cell. That's on page 47. There's a story I think has to do with that medical doctor that was taking what he's not supposed to take when he's not supposed to take it. Well, that's it from Leadership Newspaper.
Mission you guys are talking about concerning revenue in Lagos. Well, I'm not sure they really want to get all the money they can because information available in the public space, which Lagos State government needs to clear, is that commercial buses are sometimes exempted from some kinds of fines. Whether or not that is true, please let someone clear the air on that. But yes, you're right. Don't waka anyhow in Lagos. Business Day this morning leads with a big story, and this is what you have on its front page. NNPCL needs house cleaning to compete with peers. That's the lead story of the paper this morning. What does that mean? The details continue on the inside pages of the paper. A couple of riders, which are like other stories. Nigeria Oil Inc. 4 themes for change. What to know about NNPCL's ownership structure, in case you're asking that question. Well, the story has details on page 29 for you this morning on the front page. Among other stories, Finance Minister Edwin hunts for global capital at G20 summit. Details of that you find on page 4 of the Business Day newspaper this morning, and a number of other writers you'll find interesting. That's Business Day today.
I'll look at Vanguard next. Fresh inflation fears as top firms lose 656 billion naira to forex woes. Wow. And then you get to see the writer here. Losses in leading quoted companies rise 709% to 656 billion naira. All sectors losses in excess of what? 3 trillion naira. They'll transfer losses to consumers. Subscribe to analysts say this may stoke next round of inflation. Wow. They'd be allowed to do that. Shouldn't there be checks and balances to make sure that is not the case? PEPT must explain Tinubu's imprint on judgment by to Labour Party. So, people latching on to whatever possible. And then, unfortunately, Morocco quake, rescuers comb rubble for survivors as death toll hits, look at that, 2,122. Oh dear, that's terrible. Congratulations to Nigeria. Nigeria 6, Sao Tome and Principe 0. That's Vanguard.
It's a good one for them. Well, everybody very excited about the stadium was as the Akwa Ibom Stadium. Let's go on to the Guardian newspaper, and this is what they lead with. Falling consumption, weak sales threaten FMCG businesses' jobs. Now, you might be wondering, what is FMCG? As fast-moving consumer goods businesses and jobs. You go to page 6 to see more of that. But you see the graphic representation there, and one of the captions said an average Nigerian spends about $62, that's about 48,186 naira monthly on food items. And then the other one, there's this other one here, Catholic bishops decry worsening hardship in Nigeria. You can tie to that story up there. That story is on page 3 as well. And that other story Chamberlain read out about LP seeking clarity from PEPC over judgment copies issued to APC. Clarity in communication, as they say. If the people you're talking to are not hearing you or don't understand what you're saying, then you've not communicated.
But I hope they hear what was on the front page of Abuja Inquirer, because it says bandits run riot in FCT. Who would have thought? Our communities suffer weekly attacks. Wike talks tough. Well, it's a big landmass. So some communities in the FCT and Abuja, well, it's something that you need to actually follow through with, even though some activities will be going on in the FCT about him. The FCT ministers are trying to get down to work, rolling up his sleeves and doing certain things, but it's here now. They should go check it out and see a call to action, basically. And then how we're tackling forex fluctuation and inflation ascribed to the federal government, because these are the things people want to see that they address. Because at the end of the day, it boils down to purchasing power, individuals, how the economy, the indices affect them and their homes, their households. All of that are things that they want to address. Well, that is it with the Abuja Inquirer. We end to look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in a moment. Stay on with us.
There is a popular phrase in Nigeria right now.
Let the poor breathe.
This ceremony is in the bid to make that happen. It is the inauguration ceremony of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Highlighting the need for revenue as government works to discharge its responsibilities to its citizens, the President emphasized the need for a sound fiscal policy environment and a fit-to-purpose tax system.
Our target is to improve Nigeria's revenue profile while making the business environment more conducive and internationally competitive. Our aim is to transform the tax system to support sustainable development, while at the same time achieving a minimum of 18% tax to GDP ratio within the next 3 years.
The committee is mandated to address the fiscal challenges facing the economy, focusing on 3 areas: fiscal governance, tax reforms, and growth facilitation.
We cannot continue to tax poverty when we should be promoting prosperity. We should no longer tax investment or production, but focus on returns, incomes, and consumption. This government will tax the fruit, but not the seeds.
Speaking with journalists afterwards, the chairman of the Presidential Committee said the mandate of the committee will include reforms across the 3 tiers of government.
That fiscal governance also says we have to ensure we have coordination in terms of within the federal government itself, and also horizontally or vertically, I should say, with sub-nationals, particularly state, but also local government. And that's exactly what we hope to be able to do.
The World Bank country director, who was present at the ceremony, spoke positively about some of the steps taken by government.
Just the fact that what His Excellency did on his first day in office, which is eliminate fuel subsidies, that already added close to 2 percentage points of GDP to government revenues. Just because otherwise Nigeria was losing about 10 trillion naira per year to PMS subsidy.
The president has mandated the committee to come up with quick reforms that can be implemented within 30 days. They also have a mandate to ensure that they come up with critical reform measures which will come up and should be delivered within 6 months and implemented within 1 calendar year. So for the committee, their time starts now. From the presidential villa, Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Thank you for staying with us. As you've seen right there, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele joins us this morning. He is Chairman, Presidential Committee, Tax and Fiscal Policy Reforms. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, Naya.
Well, that report opened with the President's statement, now famous statement, let the poor breathe. When will the poor start breathing?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I think that statement, sometimes people don't appreciate how important it is. Unfortunately, sometimes also people say it like it's a joke or just a cliche. But the reality is that things are tough. Even before the first subsidy removal and the harmonization of exchange rate windows, because we have to think about both of them. In fact, sometimes you would agree that the impact of the exchange rate harmonization could even be bigger than the impact of first subsidy removal. Combined, what that has meant is the 133 million people living in multidimensional poverty are not finding it easy. Think about it this way. When things are hard for the middle class and the elites, they cut down on savings and investment. They still meet their basic needs. For the poorest people what they have to cut down is from 3 meals, if they're lucky, it's 2. Some were doing 2, it's down to 1. Some were doing 1, they reduce the portion. Some have reduced the portion before, there's nothing else to do. Some will withdraw their kids from school. Some will not be able to get medical treatment. I'm even talking about paracetamol to fight malaria. We removed subsidy from fuel, and it meant you would have noticed that traffic is light. But if you think deeply, what it actually means is that the people who are unable to put their cars on the road the way they used to do were the lower income people, right? If you also think about it, those are the people who would regularly patronize the vulcanizers, the mechanics. So if you speak to the vulcanizers now, life is difficult. For them, the apprentices that work with them and the families that they support. So the long and short of it is, there has to be that sense of urgency to do something quickly.
Communicating that urgency is also another issue.
I do agree with you, because it doesn't matter how well intended your actions are. If you don't communicate, in fact, it can have the opposite effect.
Which it seems to have been having. But let's go to some of the myths of the matter. One of the first questions that comes to mind for me, especially in terms of our fiscal environment, is one of the questions that we asked you, previously, which is that of leaks, financial leaks in government. I always reference, my colleagues have labeled me, concerning the Auditor General's report. Successive Auditor General's report from as far back as I can remember continue to point at situations that are very damning. Where we have, in fact, I think I remember a SERAP analysis saying that we had a deficit in the region of 2.something trillion unaccounted for. Maybe not stolen, but unaccounted for in the budget of 2017. Now, that is definitely concerning. And when you read it, read the report, it says, look, so-so person is supposed to give account, but unfortunately, that report is not even getting the attention of the National Assembly until like 2-3 years down the line. So, is there any way, what have you discovered in terms of such leakages in government?
Yeah, very interesting. The mandate of the Presidential Committee that I have the opportunity to share is quite broad, and it covers issues around the spending. So we say, 1, the quality of spending, the priority of what you are spending the money on, and the efficiency. I would say, for example, if it took us over 10 years and we haven't completed Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, that's not good enough. If you are building flyovers when you don't have clean potable water, you don't have primary schools with covered roof, it's wrong priority. And even when the priority is right, is that the amount you should be spending? So every time I look at the Auditor's General report, it breaks my heart. And some of the studies we have done, even before my current role around the taxpayers' perception, shows that they do not trust government. Nigerians do not trust government, and it's one of the reasons why they don't want to pay taxes. So first and foremost, I even think that those reports should be up to date. We should not be talking about 2017 in 2023. We do not lack accountants. We do not lack the technology. So if we decide today that government accounts, including, just imagine seeing the federal government's balance sheets and the balance sheet for your states, and it's on time, right? I'll say within 3 months after the end of the period, we should have the financial statement of government. In fact, one suggestion that is coming from my committee is, someone said, the Constitution says the president and the governor should present the budget for the next fiscal year. Why can't we amend the Constitution to say, as you are presenting the budget for the next year, give us the account for the one you just did, so it becomes constitutional? And when you break down those reports from the Auditor General, you would also see that some of the people who are not complying with paying taxes are the organs and agencies that should be driving tax collection themselves and compliance. So it's tough, and the solution to the problem is never to then say, since we don't like the way they're spending the money, some of them are not compliant, all of us should just not comply. Then we no longer have a society. So which means the one option we have is to get government to do the right thing by holding them to account, by asking for more transparency, and then by speaking up. And also playing our own part, whatever that may be in terms of paying our taxes. I do admit that the number of taxes are too many. The burden is too much, particularly on the lower cadre of society, and that's part of the mandate that Mr. President has given to my committee to reduce that burden. And back to your first comment around, to let the poor breathe. Yeah.
But, you still haven't really told me exactly what your findings have been and how do we block these leakages, because the MDs are not just going to fold their hands and say, okay, let's just be. So what have you found out? You've told us that it's been acceptable for you, even unacceptable for you, even before you got into government. But now that you're in this role, what have you found out, and what do you think we have to do?
Yeah, interesting. So we haven't found out a lot. If the mandate of my committee is for 1 year, divided into 3 milestones. So the first one is quick wins within 30 days. And those quick wins were meant to address the socio-economic issues we are dealing with, fuel subsidy removal, exchange rate, and some of the things are like impediments to people just wanting to live honestly, making decent living, including Nigerians who want to be in Nigeria and work for global organizations. So that is what we have prioritized, and that in itself was a lot of work. But I have to say I've been blessed with, the almost anything you can ask for in terms of human resources and the support from the system. So our draft report was only just concluded a couple of days ago. Mr. President is out of the country. Our 30 days was 7th of September. So it's in our phase 2 where we're going to be doing a lot of findings. So I don't want to say something that I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Okay. I'm assuming that you want the president to see the report before you let the cat out of the bag. Yes,
certainly.
Okay, but so what are the things? In that report, you also mentioned conversations with the subnationals. What are some of the discoveries that you have made? Because what affects the federal government also affects the state governments as well.
Yeah, very good question. So, in fact, without apportioning blames, when it comes to the poorest people in society, the most impact on their lives, whether it's positive or negative, tends to come from the local government first, and then the state before the federal government. Yeah. Some of the things we found out, if you just look at the list of taxes and levies, you see all manners of, like wheelbarrow tax. Who does that, right? Life is hard already. That someone has to do that hard labor just to make ends meet. Maybe you end up with 2,000 a day, right?
And that kind of, my apologies, that kind of tax or levy is coming from the local government?
Yes. It's coming from the local government. Again, I'm not blaming them because someone put it in the constitution and then they created a list and they said this is what you could collect. So altogether today we have over 60 of those different taxes and levies. We think we should have less than 10 single digits. And we think that by having less than 10, that the magic is that the people will actually pay less and government will collect more, because where you get the efficiency from is the collection that sometimes does not go to government today. People are harassed. In fact, someone told us, it was Matan, the Market Trader Association, people said, just selling pure water in the market, they call it ticket. They say you need 7 tickets every single day. Just imagine that. Ticket for what? So
local government tickets.
Yeah, local government.
That is definitely not in the Constitution.
Yeah, it's not in the Constitution, that I can tell you. But they can always find a way to say, well, the Constitution says we could levy taxes on market. So you create different names for them, right? So
for those selling pure water.
Yes, just pure water. So you can imagine if you graduate it to someone who is selling something, much more, expensive than water. Now, and there was even one I read in one of the things we were doing while I was at PwC for media excellent reporting, and then we read this story about a woman in Yaba, a tailor, and then she would go there, carry the head of the machine and the base, And then there was no money to even get transport. So she trekked to the market. She trekked and then put down the stuff. She hasn't made 1 naira. And then they showed up and they said 400 naira. And she was begging and pleading. So they removed the head of the machine and walked away. And she started crying. So I said, but we can't be doing this to ourselves, right? So these are people in society that we should, on a normal day, be writing them a check every month, so they can keep body and soul together. It's bad enough we're unable to do that. It's even more painful that we then extract from them. And more often than not, those extractions don't get to government, so those people will never get any benefit from those payments. So essentially, to your question about subnational is, we think that we'll never be able to solve these problems by focusing only on the federal government. We need to pay equal attention to the subnational, local government, states. In our courtesy visit, that's my committee to the vice president. I think it's exactly 2 weeks ago now. That was the reason for that, to be able to have the engagement with the NEC, National Economic Council, where we have the governors. And then we'll go beyond that and also interact with the local government. We'll pay some of them a visit so we can understand their perspective. This is not about blaming anyone. This is to say that we have to work together in solving these problems for our country.
Well, that's really interesting. But then another angle in this whole conversation is, because I was going to ask you how you intend to interface with the state governments, but good that that's going on. The private sector is also very, very critical in all of this conversation. What are the discoveries that you have made with them? There are a good number of them who say, we've read countless reports, and I'm pretty sure you're aware, that at the ports alone, I think this report was on the front page of one of the dailies about 2 years ago, that at the ports, $100 million is 100 million naira is collected daily. I was shocked. Is it daily or monthly? I was shocked to find that such a thing happens. And then we still don't have the kind of smooth operations at the ports that we are supposed to have. So that, for instance, is one of the areas in which the private sector operates. What are your findings and what do we need to do? Which agencies of government are culpable in this?
Yeah, I've spent over 20 years of my career dealing with these issues, relating with both the public sector and the private sector. From the global multinational to the micro and nano businesses. I've been to, Balogun, Onisha Market, I've been to those places where you relate with the real people who are trying to just survive. So what we have found out is a lot of these problems have been created because there hasn't been that deliberate attempt to do a review like what we now have to say from end to end, where do we have those problems and bottlenecks? So, and that speaks to one of the pillars of the presidential committee that I'm sharing, which is really about economic growth facilitation. When you then break it down, we have an aspect of competitiveness and then economic growth. So where we're looking at what are the impediments to trade for everyone. So if you take the ports, there are 1,001 war stories that people can tell you, from the question about importing from China to the ports being a lot cheaper than getting it from the port to somewhere in Ogun State. Not only is it more expensive financially, it takes much longer. And if you have that situation where you then have demurrage, you have a lot of other costs that you can't even account for, then we are then surprised that there is inflation and people can't afford, basic things. So these issues have to be addressed. One way we are looking at it is, we think that many of these agencies would rather not be bothered with this function of trying to collect levies here and there, and they rather focus on their core mandates, which then will mean that they're able to perform their roles better. And then we can use technology or whatever it is to harmonize those collections so it's easier to pay, maybe USSD or whatever it is, multi-channel mode of payment. With receipts you can get electronically on your device, for example. It doesn't have to be a smartphone, by the way. And then That level of efficiency in collection and transparency will give you more revenue that you can use to take care of society. It will take off the burden from the agency so they can focus on their primary mandate. That in itself facilitates economic growth. And altogether, we think this is a fantastic win-win situation for everyone. And we're not seeing anything that it's out of this world or even novel for that matter. It's done everywhere, including countries in Africa and countries outside of Africa. So we, one agency that I would not mention, so private sector people, some of the few meetings I've had, where they had an analysis that shows that this agency was collecting dollars from them, and it was the highest in the world, and they are also planning to increase it. So we're even saying to ourselves, why do we have to pay an agency of government in Nigeria in dollars? We don't have dollars. That not only increases the cost of doing business, it creates an extra demand in the foreign exchange market that makes Naira to further depreciate. And once it depreciates, we can know, what that means. It just, it filters through the economy by way of higher prices for goods and services, and more people get into poverty. I think a lot of the problems we're dealing with are not rocket science. They're things we can deal with the right leadership, and then with people who want to do the right thing, one step at a time. I think we'll get there.
Just a quick one on that revelation that you just gave us. Is there any agency of government that pays duties or royalties or makes returns to the federal government in foreign exchange that is legally empowered to do that, other than the NNPC?
Yeah, so the answer, unfortunately, is yes. So we have some laws in Nigeria that permit some agencies to collect levies and taxes in dollars. I would say for certain, the FRS. So, for example, it's not like there's anything wrong with the FRS collecting, taxes in dollars, because they will remit to government also in dollars. But the way it works is, I think there was a wrong thinking about what it meant. So, if people are watching you online, or you want to do an online program and you subscribe without promoting anyone, and some of these organizations are not Nigerian companies. Let's say you have to pay $1,000 for the software. So in Nigeria, there's value-added tax, 7.5%. There's withholding tax, sometimes about 10%. So after paying $1,000, because you need to go to the forex market to bid for the $1,000 to pay. When you're done, the taxman says, well, based on our laws, since this transaction happened in dollars, you also pay me my taxes in dollars. So you go back to the foreign exchange market to go and bid for maybe another $200 to pay government. Now, when you do that, what you're doing is you're increasing the demand in the foreign exchange market, and when you get the dollar, it's moving it from right hand to the left hand. It has not increased the dollar supply in Nigeria, but it has created an extra dollar demand. So, which is why the work of my committee, phase 2 that we're getting into now, are critical reforms where we're going to be looking at those laws and say, we wrote these laws for ourselves, nobody gave them to us. So let's just go back and amend them. Maybe they were relevant and useful 20, 30 years ago, but today, clearly, they're creating more problems than solutions for us.
Now, how significant has that been on the economy?
I'll say it's been significant. We don't have specific data to measure it, but while I was at PwC, I could tell you easily, anytime, that I had clients who had taxes to pay. The law says they should pay them in dollars. They couldn't find dollars. Yeah, and they were large amounts. So a couple of times the FRS has come up to say, we allow you pay in Naira. To be honest, they didn't have any legal basis to do that, but they were just so looking at, why are we making life difficult? So government can't get the revenue on time. The people can't get the dollars to pay. It's just, chaotic sometimes, if you want to describe it. And this is just one example. So you have other examples in different scenarios like that. We have to create demand for our Naira, not against it. So which is what I think we're doing inadvertently in some cases. I hope we even get to a point that even the petroleum companies that are producing crude oil will be asked to pay their taxes in Naira. Let them carry their dollars and go and sell it in the forex market to buy Naira to go and pay government. So that way you create liquidity that is sustainable, and then you can have a stable currency that then attracts a lot of investment in your direction. And without those investments, there can be no economic growth.
I know my colleagues in Abuja would also want to weigh in, but let me ask you this. You stated it the other time. You hinted at nano, micro, and small businesses. How tough is it with them? I know you've mentioned the pure water seller and a number of others like that, but those are largely unregulated, one might say. Even for the regulated MSMEs and the rest of them, what are the upsides that they should look forward to? Because if things are so tough for them, they are going to stop employing, or even from what information we even have available, even FMCGs are beginning to lose businesses and consequently, relieve some workers of their jobs. Job losses are increasing, unemployment figures are getting worse. So what are the upsides for the micro, small, and medium enterprises in a way that will help them remain in business? If you want to cite any example of any particular sector, please do.
Yeah, so we don't have accurate numbers, but different sources will give you around 40 million nano MSMEs. I think sometimes we forget the nano because that's the only reason why it got to 40 million. Some of these people don't even consider themselves as doing business. They just think they're hustling to survive, which is really what they're doing. And the data also further suggests that about 97-98% of that 40 million are actually these people who are struggling. Most times they're the only employee, they're everything, they're the MD, they're the messenger, so they just do everything themselves, maybe with family members. Those are the people for us where we need urgent intervention because they're struggling. Survival is difficult on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, what they should expect is that the burden that they're having to carry now would reduce significantly. One of the reasons why this is a priority for us is that if you come to a large company and you tell them you're owing 10 million naira tax bill, chances are that they have an accountant who can defend them, a lawyer, or they can even hire a consulting firm to defend them. So at the end of the day, maybe they don't have any tax liability. When you go to that woman or that man who is struggling to survive, he doesn't even he has not even seen a copy of the tax law before, he has no idea how to defend him or herself, then you say, Madam, you are owing us 1 million naira. So the person will start begging. And then they say, oh, God, pay 200,000 to this account, then pay 100 to government, and then you now say thank you on top of it. Maybe you shouldn't have paid at all. So we think that is not being fair to our most vulnerable people. Part of what my committee is planning to do is that when we are done, we should have a tax ombudsman that is funded by the government that can defend this kind of people.
Federal or state?
It will be national. So we're looking for a structure that cuts across. First and foremost, legally take away their burden. So I was just looking at it just a few days ago. Brazil just increased the exemption for personal income tax to about 400,000 naira per month. You don't pay tax on it. UK, it's about 13,000 pounds. That's almost 1 million. I know that it's not the same because cost of living is high, but they have been intentional in trying to establish what is it that people need to survive and exempt it from tax. We need to do that in Nigeria. The threshold is too low. So if you officially exempt a lot of these people from tax, then nobody can even harass them if they don't have any taxes.
So is that 25 million threshold
for VAT?
Yes, it's not enough.
I'll say we need data to determine what will be enough. I don't think it's enough. That's just barely 2 million a month. If you calculate 2 million a month, you divide by 30 days, you're barely just, maybe selling pure water. By the time you take out your cost, there's nothing left. But clearly, the personal income tax one is only 30,000 naira per month. What can you do with 30,000? So if you earn 31,000 naira per month, you start paying personal income tax. We need to increase those thresholds so that the poor can breathe.
Chamberlain.
Yeah, Mr. Oyedele. So do we expect some executive order from the president concerning the first phase, which you say you concluded?
Yes. The expectation is that Mr. President will need to sign executive orders. In fact, we also think that even governors might need to sign because some of the recommendations we have in our report, which I am not going to discuss as of yet, also require actions by subnational. So what we're planning to do is we prepare the orders. If Mr. President is happy, he will then sign them so that those things can take effect immediately. For the things where you need to amend the law, it takes a bit more time. We may then have to consider an emergency intervention law and then find a way to take that through the National Assembly very quickly. And then for the states and local government, then the governors would then sign those executive orders. Some of them will come in form of directives and public notices. We're looking at all the instruments that are necessary to give effect to our recommendation as quickly as possible. Starting with we call them quick wins, where you don't need a long process. Of course, for example, if you need to amend the Constitution, that's not going to happen in 1 month or two. But there's clearly a lot of low-hanging fruit and fruit on the ground that we can pick in the next few days and weeks.
So, we always talk about how to ensure that we adequately implement a lot of these policies and laws when they're signed. So is there any unique, specific focus or strategy to ensure that once that is done, it is implemented as soon as possible?
The answer is yes. One of the excitement for me personally in this my new role is that the president was very clear to say, I'm not just looking for reports, I'm looking for you guys to help me implement. So if we say, for example, you should exempt, people who earn more than 30,000, I'll not give you the number we have in mind, say that amount is 60 or 70,000 from tax. If the president says, I'm fine with it, and the governor says, we're also fine, we then immediately write the instrument to give effect to that almost immediately. And in my estimation, this would be something from 1 day to, say, maybe 2 weeks to quickly go through that. If what you are proposing is to say, well, government, we think that private sector, when you increase minimum wage, they don't benefit. How about we allow the private sector to also benefit by way of tax break or even credit? Some of the things we had thought about is if you want to do conditional cash transfer, people are poor, they need food, they need money. We think that if we had done a proper job, which we are planning to do now, you should be at a point where from the records you have with the tax authority, you know who is even poor, and you can credit them directly. Either you credit their bank accounts if they have, if they don't, you can credit their phone, and it becomes like a food stamp, which they then present and they collect the food, and it's easy to audit. And that's why many countries, when we had at the height of COVID, they didn't have to be doing palliative that got stuck at warehouses. They credited people. So people have to take the reforms we're trying to do now. If I want to do an estimation, I'll say even 90% of it is nothing to do with collecting more revenue. 90% of it is just getting economic data that we can use to plan our lives, to help our poorest people, to make sure people who are not the poorest pay their fair share, and that when all of that is done, to ensure that government is using it for the purpose of the people as it should be. So that's the journey we have ahead of us, and we believe that this is doable.
So, do you limit yourself to what is referred to as tax? I mean, they call it taxes, but there are those who also say, but you have levies, license fees, and since it all comes from the pockets of businesses and operators, it's a type of tax. So does that fall under your purview to look at that as well?
Yeah, interesting question, Chamberlain. So actually what we have done is we've tried to define what is a tax. We think sometimes government and tax people, and I say tax people now, knowing that many people will be saying, you're not one of them. So they can become too technical. So they tell you what the tax law book says, one theory when they were writing ICANN or CITN exam. Nobody's interested in that. As a Nigerian who is trying to sell pure water, who is a vulcanizer, who is trying to just sell food, if you come to me and you collect anything for which I have no direct benefit, it doesn't matter what you call it. To me, it's a tax I've just paid. It doesn't even matter whether it's government that collected it from me. If government allowed a tout to harass me when they don't have no powers to tackle them, I'll take it as tax. So for us, we are looking at all of that. Formal taxes, informal taxes, whether it's paid to government, or whether it's paid to other people but permitted by government, we consider it as tax, and we're going to try and reform all of that so that at the end of the day, from the person who is paying it, from their point of view, they'll feel like if I have to pay something and I have no choice as to how to pay it, how much I pay, even if you are collecting my waste, waste collection should be a fee, right? Because it's a service you are rendering. But if you confine me to a particular provider and you prescribe the rate such that it's above market rate, I'll take it that you are collecting taxes from me indirectly. What you should do is to regulate that sector, prescribe the standard that you need to meet to be able to collect my waste, and then say, dear Taiwo, in this your area, here are the 20 people that can collect, and let me go and negotiate. So we are broadening it, quite widely. And it's your point. Our work is not just about tax. It's revenue, which means tax and non-tax. It's expenditure, including capital and recurrent, the quality of spending, the priority of spending, and also debt management in terms of how do we manage our debt profile, the terms that we engage in for those debts, and how the money is even being spent and reported. So overall, I don't want to, of course, promise too much, but these are things that once we are done, people will feel the impact in a very positive way.
So Oyedele, you do have your job cut out for you. I mean, one of the things you talked about is how to create like an attraction for the Naira where those who are seeking to do business are actually looking for the Naira. And one would wonder, how would that begin to happen? How quickly can that happen? Seeing that we are in the space where we are, revenue generation's there, and we still have expenditure. Thankfully, part of your responsibility is looking at the quality of government spending. So how quickly can that begin to happen where we have people running for the Naira against running for the dollar?
So we think it's going to be a journey, but there are those what we can do in a matter of, I'll say, weeks. The demand we have currently in the market is already in the foreign exchange market as we speak. People looking for dollars, maybe also pound sterling and euros to pay all manners of levies and charges in Nigeria. I think we can take off the table almost immediately. Once you have the, maybe an executive order is signed, maybe central bank has to do some regulation, maybe it's to do with any other agency, we'll find out who those agencies should be that must take the actions immediately. And once those actions have been taken, what will happen immediately is that those demand, whatever numbers they might be, are taken off the market. And then instead of those people looking for dollars to pay, they now start looking for Naira. So in fact, the impact can almost be as double, because not only are they no longer looking for dollars, they're now looking for Naira. And the thing about it is, at the end of the day, when you do that, there was a time that Russia was even selling their crude in their local currency. And despite all the sanctions from almost the whole world, their currency appreciated until recently when it started depreciating. So this is a time-tested principle that you should not create demand against your own currency. And we also think that, government should also reduce their appetite for, foreign currency spending. So if, for example, an agency can do a training in Nigeria, if you have 20 people who want to be trained, and the person who can, let's say the only person who can train them is American in the US. So instead of 20 people traveling to America, maybe you bring one person to Nigeria to come and train you. And I was glad when Mr. President said the other time that if you don't have an item on the agenda for hunger, United Nations General Assembly, do not go. We think that should actually become structural and institutionalized, that the president doesn't have to say it. It should just happen naturally. So let's start demanding and creating interest in Naira, such that even Nigerians will prefer to save in Naira rather than looking for dollars to save because they are afraid that Naira will lose its value before they know it. So all of these things, some of them will take a while, some of them will take years, some of them a matter of days, weeks, and months. We are starting with those ones where we can make quick progress, and then we move forward from there.
Yes, indeed, it will take time to see the fruits of these labor begin to show forth. And one will say considering the fact also that those who are in leadership are amongst those who even spend the foreign currency more, that will be a lot of assignment and responsibility for you. But let's look at this other thing about the level of trust. It's been said that the Nigerian people themselves will not trust government enough, especially when it comes to taxes. So how would you break through that? You see Nigerians begin to appreciate taxation and all that.
Yes, so Nigerians do not trust government. And when we did that study at the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, interestingly, it cut across, so the difference between the geopolitical zone was insignificant. And there was no difference materially between whether you were Christian or Muslim or whether you even believe in God. So essentially, these were just Nigerians saying, well, government hasn't done enough to earn our trust. And trust cannot be decreed. You cannot say, I hereby direct and decree that you must trust me. It has to be earned. So when we ask Nigerians why they don't trust government, of course, the first thing they gave was transparency and accountability. So every time you see on the pages of newspapers or on TV or radio that 2 billion is missing, 40 billion is missing. And it was also sad in the last administration that, 2 former governors that were convicted all the way to the Supreme Court were pardoned by the president. I felt pain personally because what we're saying is it doesn't matter. You can keep doing what you have been doing. So essentially, we have to earn that trust of the Nigerian people first by communicating clearly, honestly, and sincerely. So for the work of my committee, for example, we set certain principles for our recommendations to Mr. President, and one of it is it has to be credible. You can't just say something so you have said it. We don't, for example, believe that buying buses will solve the problem because how many buses can you buy? How many people can benefit from buying buses? So you have to be credible. Your information has to be clear. It has to be upfront, not the one that you're fighting misinformation. So you offer it upfront so people are clear. Okay. And number 2 is the transparency of reporting. And then accountability for when something has gone wrong so we don't see impunity all over the place. And like Ayo said, if it's to do with financial statement, do it on time. If there have been violations, let there be consequences. I don't think that Nigerians are such a hard set of human beings. I believe that if you do this and you sustain it over a period of time, then the trust will come back.
Well, just a quick one before we sign up. Part of your job is to identify relevant measures to make Nigeria an attractive destination for investment. It leads me to the question of this currency swap that we had, this arrangement with China. How successful would you say that has been in terms of investments in Nigeria from such a country as China? And do you think it is something sustainable or that should be replicated in other countries?
Yeah, I'll say, it's a good idea because whatever can save you even just $1, you don't need to look for $1 that you would have been looking for before, make some, dents. So you also have the Pan-African payment system that has been introduced, which is meant to connect with the African Continental Free Trade Area. But fundamentally, the reason why we haven't seen a lot of impact is if you agree with China to say, give me renminbi, so that when I buy from you, I'll pay Naira. When you buy from me, you pay your currency. You have to then ask yourself, you have to reconcile at some point because Naira is useless in China. So until what we are selling to them matches what we are importing from them.
In terms of value?
In terms of value. Otherwise, that arrangement will collapse at some point because you have plenty of Naira that they can't do anything with.
So we have to be more productive.
Absolutely. That's what is most important. We have to be very, very productive. And we should stop looking at just only large firms that do manufacturing. They're equally important, by the way. But even services, creative sector, accounting, legal, we have technology, extremely smart people. So every $1 that you earn here and there, you start creating value, such that you can even extend this arrangement to India. You can look at your top 10 countries where you import from. So we want to match what we're importing from these guys, so we can use our currencies without a third currency, dollars, that is creating problems for our economy.
I'm certainly looking forward to that, whatever document from the federal government as a result of the work that you have done, because this will definitely be a good one and go a long way. Taiwo Oyedele, Chairman, Presidential Committee, Tax and Fiscal Policy Reform, thank you so much for your time and all the best.
Thank you for having me.
There's more where that came from. We're back in a moment. Do stay with us.
It's the first briefing of the Ministers of Health since the assumption of office. This briefing, which is attended by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Mrs. Kachilum Daju, and directors in the Ministry of Health, is following a 3-day ministerial briefing session with departments and parastatals under the Ministry of Health. The meeting is to provide information on the realities in the health and social welfare sector and to roll out plans on how to reform the sector in line with the renewed hope agenda of the present administration.
So thank you very much for...
The coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Professor Ali Pate, announces the blueprint, which he believes will review the nation's healthcare system.
Will strengthen the regulatory capacity of our institutions. Institutions like NAFDAC, to regulate better the quality of what gets into Nigerians, their food, their drugs, and other health professional regulatory entities that need to regulate the practice. And that is only on the federal level. We will work with the states to improve the regulatory function at the sub-national level. There have been reforms that led to the National Health Act, which have not yet been implemented. So implementing the National Health Act to its fullest would be so key, including the basic healthcare provision that put primary healthcare at the foundation of our healthcare system.
He also touched on the issues of doctors living in the country and the need for more funding for the health sector.
The human resources is the most important ingredient for producing health. Lifeblood of health system is people, wherever they are. So we have met with stakeholders. We said we'll work as a team. We're all health providers. There are leaders within those health provision practices. But at the end of the day, it's all of us collectively as Nigerians in a unified way that will need to work better. Those talents have to be trained, deployed, retained, and the quality of what they deliver ought to be improved. And hopefully those who have gone away can begin to find their way back home.
Still maintaining the resolve for a renewed health sector, the Minister of State for Health, Dr. Tunji Alausa, wants Nigerians to expect a digitized healthcare system where proper data gathering will be validated and trusted to help deliver proper healthcare to Nigerians.
As part of our digitalization of our healthcare system, we're going to roll out a national electronic medical records, where electronic medical record platform, where our primary care centers, all our tertiary hospitals will come on the same platform. Then, as we move into the future, we'll encourage each state government to use the same platform.
The Minister of Health has made a couple of promises to Nigerians as regards his plans to reform the sector, from digitalization of the sector, provision of more funds for research, medical industrialization, amongst others, basically saying it won't be business as usual. But Nigerians will expect that this time, words will be matched with action to ensure implementation of these reforms to indeed improve Nigeria's health sector. From Abuja, Victoria Longjohn, Channels Television News.
Welcome back. Yes, indeed, as you've seen there, Professor Muhammad Ali Pate joins us next. He is the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
What is the social welfare component to health here?
Well, health is at the core of the existence and well-being of any individual. So at the root of it, health is connected to whether an individual survives from childhood, makes the transition to adulthood, and lives a healthy life and a productive life. So the coordinating role that we have implies that we coordinate activities of government at the federal level, but we also interrelate with subnational actors as well as external parties and non-governmental actors to improve the overall health and well-being of Nigerian citizens.
So, but before now, who's been doing that? Which ministry, agency, or anything?
Well, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration is a progressive one, and it focuses on the overall well-being of the Nigerian population. This is one of the innovations that the president, in his own wisdom, decided to add social welfare dimension to what the health sector traditionally has done. Health is not just about what happens in the hospitals or facilities. it goes beyond that. It's an all-encompassing effort that will produce health. And I think we have to really appreciate the insight, the vision that informed the president to really construct this health and social welfare as an entity, whereby we do what is needed in terms of healthcare, but also not losing sight to other determinants of health that are important to improve the overall well-being of our population, which is the most important asset that we have as a country.
So even if those other determinants of health are under another ministry, how does that work?
Well, there's one government, so it's a whole of government approach. The fact that we are cooperating, collaborating, respects the roles and the capabilities that are inherent in every sectoral ministry. But it's one government, it's one team. And working collaboratively, Ministry of Women's Affairs will deal with issues that are related to women but have implications for health. Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs has important role that it is doing and will need to do that and do that well, and we will support them to succeed in what they do.
For instance, Ministry of Water Resources.
Very important sector.
Very important.
Water and sanitation are important determinants of health. We would like Ministry of Water Resources to succeed, just as they also, in a way, would want us to succeed, but we operate as a team. So it's not a traditional sort of siloed approach that we have. It's one that is all-encompassing, and that is what will improve the overall population health in Nigeria. As you very well know, Nigeria is going through multiple transitions all at once. It's undergoing a demographic transition with a population that is youthful, but at the same time it's aging. And the structure of our population is changing gradually. We're having an epidemiological transition, whereby the patterns of diseases that we have had for the last several decades are gradually giving way to some other new forms of diseases. Non-communicable diseases are more prominent, partly because we're aging, partly because of lifestyle changes. Those also need to be accounted for. Thirdly, we're also undergoing an economic transition from where we were a few decades ago to where we are now with services, with all kinds of new ways of doing things in the economy. And that have implication in terms of what people do. It's no longer just farming alone, but several other things. Mental health are emerging to be issues. So I think nutritionally, even what we eat is gradually changing from traditional what we eat, unfortunately, to more processed types of food. So we have higher incidence of diseases accompanying that. So to address that, it's not just one bucket. It's a whole of government approach, finance, planning, health, education, working in a coordinated manner to improve the health and well-being of individuals.
We'll attempt to break that down as we proceed, but this feeds into this next bit, where during the COVID period, one of the highlights for a lot of people was when the former SGF, Boss Mustafa, appeared before the NAS committee and said they didn't know the health sector was that bad. And ever since then, many people have been looking to see, okay, what's going to change dramatically? How do we approach the health sector and we see that visible change? But the rest is history. You're not new to the health sector. Tell us about this 4-point agenda of yours, which you spoke about. How are you going to operation? What are they first? Yes, you spoke a little bit about it. How is it going to be operationalized?
I think there's scope for significant improvement in terms of what we do in the health sector. At the core of it, people that work hard within the health sector have to be appreciated for what they have been able to do with limited financing, with all kinds of challenges. Take insecurity, for instance. There are many health workers who have been kidnapped in the course of doing their work in rural areas in different parts of the country. Yet, health workers have continued to work hard to deliver services. Now, are they perfect? No. Is there scope for significant improvement? Yes. And that's why we have articulated these 4 buckets of things that we would do. My colleague and I, the Minister of State for Health, Dr. Tunji Alausa, and I, myself, are committed, based on the President's mandate, to pursue those 4 elements to improve the overall state of health in Nigeria, one of which is to improve the governance of it. It's not just the federal government that has a responsibility for health of Nigerians. All state governors, all local government authorities have to play their part to invest, to ensure the services are delivered and the quality of services is good. We need to include everyone, not only the public sector, but the private sector in the conversation, the civil actors, to really speak, have a consensus as a country that we want to improve the health of Nigerians. We need to have better institutions that will regulate the performance of health. NAFDAC, others that are regulators in the sector, professional regulators. We need to have good data, and we need to be more transparent and accountable to Nigerians. And we need to speak to Nigerians with respect, and within ourselves reduce the discord. That is a realm of governance. We earn the respectability, but we forge ahead in one direction. The second part is to improve the population health outcomes, what we deliver. Primary health care, which is in the realm of states and local government, secondary facilities that are in the realm of states and local government, but the teaching hospitals and tertiary facilities under the federal government have to be run better. We have put our chief executives on notice. We want to know the quality of what is being delivered to Nigerians through the federal teaching hospitals. We'll need to improve on the infrastructure, the equipment, and the capabilities that are inherent in those health workers in the front lines through the facilities that are controlled by the federal government. Considering the fiscal limitations of this country, I think we have to be realistic. But I think it's not out of place to think that quaternary hospitals need to be thought about. For 40, 50, since 60, 70 years, we've had 3 levels of hospitals. Since our population was 50, 60 million, first, second, and third. Is it not high time when we have 220 million Nigerians to think about the 4th level? Because when you look at other countries like China, they have 5-level health system. So I think thinking about quaternary level, specialized facilities is an important part of it. And bringing the private sector to contribute in doing that so that the medical tourism that goes abroad to private facilities can be retained at home. That's the second bucket. The third bucket is this healthcare value chain. There's a value chain inherent in health. There's a reason why health is the second largest component of the US GDP. Why? Because from pre-service training to the services in running a hospital, not just the clinical services, to manufacturing of commodities, consumables, vaccines, medical devices, we have a lot of scope. At the moment, we are only buying from others. We don't produce as much as we should, or not at the quality or the number that. But if we do that well, we can export what we produce for health to the sub-region, to other regions in the continent, and also perhaps globally. So that brings in the economic value chain, that there is an economic growth imperative also in health. But that's not only the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, Sovereign Investment Fund, private sector actors, the regulators have to join hands, and we are driving that. That is a third pillar, so that we begin to be more producing what we need. And you mentioned COVID.
Yeah.
When COVID happened, we were asking for others to help us with masks, with vaccines, with all kinds of things. We should be in a trajectory whereby over the next several years, we have some modicum of production capacity that we don't need to ask for masks to be imported from far places. We have textiles. We can produce those kinds of things ourselves. That's what we're getting at. And the fourth bucket is really on this issue of health security. Health, COVID, which you said, started as an infectious disease. Very simple infectious disease from Wuhan. It affected all parts of the world, but not all parts of the world, not all the population in the world had COVID infection. But economic impact of it has been devastating across the globe. Countries have now recovered. So it shows something, that health security is linked to economic security and is linked to national security. When Ebola happened, we saw what happened in West Africa. So investing in detecting outbreaks, knowing when they occur, responding to them. Some may be things like Lassa, like cholera, but others might be new pathogens that we don't even know. And when they occur, we should sense them, control our ports, and have the capability, the frontline health workers that are trained to address them before they get out of hand. And that we have the capabilities that are domestic in-house, but linked to other countries, because diseases do not respect borders. An infectious disease from China affected everybody. So we want to protect ourselves from what might come into our country, but we also want to be responsible parties in the global community by protecting diseases that are emanating from our own client, from going out of our borders to other countries. So it's an interrelated interrelated issues that we have to deal with in this arena of health security, which is linked to our own national security, regional security, and global health security. And we'll pursue that through the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, through the many public health labs we have, the many researchers that we have. In both the industrialization as well as the health security aspect, there's an important role for research and development. we are not investing enough in the capabilities to generate new knowledge, new insight that is locally relevant in our own country, so that we can use that to generate intellectual property that can translate into producing things that will benefit our people and perhaps benefit the world.
Do you have a target to change that?
Well, we are laying down the foundations right now to improve the investments in research and development. In the short term, everybody knows the fiscal circumstances of our country. So I wouldn't tell you that we'll put X amounts of money towards research, but we'll mobilize even from external sources, from private sector sources, our own domestic private sector to contribute. Even institutions like the TED Fund, which has contributed immensely during the pandemic, financing, supporting research in our universities. We need to work with them to really invest more in generating new knowledge, the capabilities of our academicians, to really have insights that will translate into intellectual property that can be developed, which can be useful locally, but also useful outside our borders.
You know, Dr. Pate, well, you mentioned the universities, and that got me excited a little, because I do know that we have a lot of federal universities and even the private universities, all of them, or almost all of them, with medical schools, research institutions embedded in them. The question is, how strong would they, how quickly would that link, would that linkage between what you're planning to do, this 4-point agenda, and the relationship with this research institution, a country, how quickly would that kick in?
Well, I mentioned that we have a whole of government approach to what we're trying to do. It's not just what is under our direct control at the Ministry of Health and Social Welfare. My colleague, Minister of Education and the Minister of State for Education, are two colleagues that we'll work closely with in terms of what TED Fund, for instance, can do for the health research institutions and our teaching hospital, because they are important part of building the capabilities. And that will be a start, but it's a long journey for us to go from where we are spending less than 0.5% of our resources of research and development to where we are spending significant chunk of our resources in research and development. The capabilities in our universities themselves have to be developed so that researchers ask the right questions, use the right methods, and produce results that can be touted really as world-class results. I know that there are some, like Christian Happy, which is here who is here in Nigeria, has done amazingly well, and he's recognized all over the world. And there are several others that are actually in that path. But there are many others that are much further behind. Working between health and education, I think we need to collaborate more, begin to lay the foundation so that the trajectory that we had been on, which has been we are consumers of research from other places, would need to change over time.
Okay, in all of this, innovative ideas and things that you put out, there are challenges. One of the biggest challenges to the healthcare delivery in Nigeria is the fact that the population is not as informed as information. So would that be something that you'd be looking to turn around? How quickly, again, I like that quickly, because Nigerians will be looking to see what's the fastest way you can get these things done. To educate Nigerians about the health situation, how they can move away and become healthier people.
So in matters of health, no one can or should stand on the fence, because health affects everyone. It affects the media, it affects politicians, it affects technocrats, it affects parents, communities, and leaders of all kinds. You know, a few years ago when vaccination was an issue, we mobilized parts of the country that had resisted this by engaging trusted community leaders, traditional leaders, His Eminence the Sultan, religious leaders of all religions that we could engage with. And they mobilized the communities and expanded access to, expanded the acceptance of communities for those important life-saving services. We do intend to transform that effort to an effort whereby all traditional leaders, through their state councils of emirs and chiefs, are co-opted into this governmental effort, together with their state governments, to drive the awareness and the engagement of communities. And they have networks that go across to different levels. That's just one plank. The conversation we're having with you is not just to share information, but the media itself, what you say, can be far more influential than what the minister or any chief executive will say, because people respect you and you've got the platform to do that. So the media is an important element to translate what government is intending in a way that people begin to understand it better. And in terms of education, for instance, we talked about research side, which is of higher level, but I think it's important for our colleagues in the education sector, not only federal level, but state level, to begin to focus on the school health and also what we teach our young ones, so that they're aware, things like basic hygiene and sanitation and how it links to health, importance of scientific advances on vaccines, preventive things, early detection. Things like cervical cancer, for instance. It's an issue, it's a third leading cause of cancer in our country. Particularly, it's 100% women that have cervical cancer. And now there's a vaccine. And in the next few weeks, we will launch, under the leadership of the president, an effort to vaccinate, to prevent cervical cancer using the HPV vaccine. Now, people, parents, adolescents need to begin to understand that this is an intervention that will pay dividend down the pipe. And it's not just health people that will need to expand that. Overall, our country collectively has to have a consensus that this is what matters to us. Yeah. And the technical folks then deliver that. So
that comes under the health, you call it population health outcomes, right?
Yes, yes.
Again, that's one of the biggest parts, apart from the funding side, that your ministry will be looking to see how quickly these things can be resolved and move on. But again, that part about funding, when you've talked about bringing in the private sector, both locally and...
Yes.
Then there will be the issue of a lot of things looking for the limited resources that are available. Yes. What's the innovative way you're going to go about pulling in the funds that are needed, get the health sector in Nigeria up and good?
So I think it's very clear that for a very long time, Nigeria as a country, as a people, we had not prioritized investing in our health. And I will explain why that has been the case. We spend very little public resources for health compared to many other countries. Much of the health spending in Nigeria is from families and out of pocket. Only $10, $11 per person is what our governments at federal level, at state level actually invest. That's low for the size of our economy. Overall, as you very well know, government collects less of its revenue compared to the GDP that it has. It's one of the lowest in the world. So yes, whole of government effort, and you were speaking about tax reform, that's why it's linked to more revenue for government. But within that revenue that needs to increase to government, it has to be prioritized so that more of it goes to invest in health. And that investment needs to go up. That will build our facilities, train our health workers, improve their conditions of service, provide the commodities, strengthen the regulators, so that as a people, and that's not only the federal government. Many state governments don't put a penny, a kobo, in terms of investing in their health for a very long time. They depend on external sources, and they use those sources through other ways. We need to build some efficiencies in other wasteful spendings and other sources of leakages so that the limited resources that we have can be put to good use. So there is a need to increase the resources overall to government, prioritize more of our resources in government to health, and that's the realm of the coordinating minister and the Minister of Budget, National Planning and Budget, and what we do in health in terms of providing those ideas so that the resources can be invested upon, and the governors also doing the same. And then the efficiencies, meaning that we cut losses, wastes that occur by investing in things that are really not needed, will not really serve the most people, but for various interests. And there we need our political leaders, the parliamentarians, our senators and House. Even if you have a constituency project, for goodness sake, put this constituency project in something that will be useful and translated into services for the people that you are trying to help.
All right.
The external side, the private sector has an important role that it can play. The economic value chain is there, so investors need to consider the manufacturers of generics, devices, the services, the contractors. They are also contributing, and that is the collective pool of resources that we need to put to use to improve the health sector, which will ultimately contribute in the productivity of our economy and its growth over the long term.
So we'll go to break, but when we return, there are a few scenarios that Nigerians face on a day-to-day basis when they try to engage with the health sector institutions there. So we'd like to ask you some of those questions before we go over to Lagos. But we're back in just a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Prof, yes, we know the health sector is huge and it's a job of work that we all have to be involved in whichever way possible, because, I mean, we all know health is wealth. So, about NAFDAC, what is it that you're going to do? Because it appears from the outside that they are overburdened. You know, there's usually a lot of focus on food, but there's drug components, so several scenarios. We know about some drug manufacturing companies, even those who deal here who have stopped because of counterfeiting of some of those facilities, those meds. We don't even import a lot of what we need. I mean, that you also have stated severally. Are you going to, what? Is there going to be some sort of reorganization, separating drugs and food? What would you do about that?
So we're going to be very deliberate in terms of the steps that we take. Commissioning institutional reviews of several of the parastatals in the Federal Ministry of Health. Look at their capabilities. What are they doing well and what are they not doing very well? And how can we improve those capabilities so they are effective and efficient in fulfilling their functions? NAFDAC is a regulator of food and drugs. Over the last several years, I think the current Director General has achieved some key milestones. Globally, there's a maturity level that each national regulator gets to. Ours is maturity level 3. And there are only 3 other national regulators in Africa that have reached that level of maturity. We're working towards getting it to even the higher level, maturity level 4. And that is very objective, step-by-step way of improving the capability of a national regulator. But that is not to say that it's all good across the board. It may be good in terms of the licensing and in terms of maybe the food registration, but there are other elements that it may need to do more. Regulating the distribution of drugs, for instance, downstream. What happens in the ports is not only NAFDAC. Even if NAFDAC is there, the customs is important, NDLEA is important, and others are important to curtail the importation and smuggling of substandard products. But then when they are distributed as well, NAFDAC has to be able to work with others to ensure that the regulators, NDLEA, Pharmaceutical Council, and NAFDAC work to stem those illicit or substandard drugs from being distributed. You hear a few of them being announced in the public space, but there's a lot more that is not either detected or it's not coming out in the public space. So NAFDAC will need to do better in that, and it has to be a stronger institution that has trained people and that is researched accordingly. Things like bioequivalence, in terms of the laboratory to test not only the chemical equivalence of drugs that are coming into the country or manufactured in the country, or whether they are biologically equivalent to what they purport to be. Those are things that we would do in 2024, for instance, to ensure that Nigeria has a bioequivalence lab that is able to satisfy others. Now, our manufacturers will be shafted if we don't have an effective regulator. So as part of this industrialization, you need a strong regulator, which then allows folks to compete on the basis of quality. Because if you produce at a higher price and yet the market is being flooded by substandard products at cheaper price, you will not survive, like you said. So that's just an example of how proper regulation, not predatory regulation, but really effective, efficient regulation can play in catalyzing not only domestic production, but also protecting the health and well-being of Nigerians. I think that's an important element of the overall governance of the Nigerian health sector, which you had not attended to in a very concerted way compared to what we are now planning to do.
Insurance. We know how huge health insurance is, not just here, but globally. How it helps, takes away a lot of burden and so many things. I've been to a lot of some of these facilities and I see how important the potential it has, but there's a huge limit. People can't exceed certain thresholds. So are you going to focus on that in that area? What would you do about it?
Well, this is one of the promises that President made during his campaign, which was buttressed by the Presidential Advisory Council, to expand, to make the National Health Insurance Authority, the new authority which was signed into law by his predecessor, to double down on expanding insurance coverage on Nigeria's path to quality access, universal health coverage in particular. That's sort of on the path. We need that. Many Nigerians are pushed into poverty by cost of ill health. Financial protection issue is not going in the right direction because there are many families, many households, the cost of paying out of pocket actually impoverishes them. You and I may afford certain things, but imagine a farmer, a trader in a local village who gets malaria and he has to cough off 5,000-10,000 naira to buy medicines. That is a large chunk of the household income. That means they forego food on the table or paying school fees to pay for ill health. They go into poverty. So health insurance is a very important part. But over the last 50 years, Nigeria has been on a journey since 1974, and we're still not up to 10% coverage. Why? Because there has to be a large enough risk pool, and folks have to contribute into that pool so that those who are ill can be protected. We never really did that until recently. It was voluntary, and even the formal workers were not contributing. But with the new Health Insurance Act, which has made it mandatory, states need to come in, employers need to come in, and individuals, private individuals, need to contribute so that we have a wide enough pool that allows us to pay for those who are ill. It's an insurance, but it's a national insurance that we should have. Even there are different parts within the insurance.
Okay.
Now, the effectiveness of the regulator has to be looked at, and that's part of the review that we're going to do. NHI as an institution, and how we interface it with the health maintenance organizations. Are they busy chasing their businesses, or how do they ensure that, in fact, there is quality of what is being purchased, that the standards are high enough, and that there is commensurate, let's say, sets of accountabilities in terms of the care that is being delivered. So all in all, we need to expand it, no doubt. We have not done it. If after 50 years we are at 10%, if I tell you that we'll go to 80% in 4 years, I'm not being truthful to you. So, but it's a Herculean task, but it can be done. And we are really going to focus on the National Health Insurance Authority to ensure that, in fact, it is more effective, more efficient in regulating this sector, consistent with the aspiration for universal health coverage.
Dr. Pate, I know my colleague...
Just a quick one. This is a two-pronged one before we go to Lagos. You did say that 400,000 personnel in the workforce is not enough.
Yes.
But we know that health doctors in this country don't feel valued. So time and again, they're on their way, on their bike out of the country. So what specifically, because you can't achieve much if you don't have those key personnel here, how do you intend to ensure that they don't ever go on strike and perhaps the rivalry between themselves and other health workers is addressed?
I was just going to put in that the nurses and all of that, the auxiliary workers, the midwives are also feeling, hey, what are we doing here and all of that. So.
Well, health workers are the most important ingredient that we have to produce health. They're so important that without health workers, we cannot have good health services. Robots cannot deliver. Hospitals cannot deliver, and equipments cannot test themselves. And when I say health workers, I mean the doctors who are highly qualified, and there are many great ones in all of our hospitals in Nigeria. There are exceptionally talented nurses that we have, brilliant pharmacists, we have laboratory scientists, we have community health workers, we have different cadres of health workers in Nigeria. And I believe there is no health worker that goes into health profession who does not want to serve others to help make someone's life better. But the circumstances around them, the clinical governance systems around them, compensation, and other issues that have emerged over several years have undermined their ability to deliver. And many of them leave, and they get into these rancorous fights because it's become extraordinarily political. I would say, in the last 3 weeks, a colleague, the Minister of State, and I have engaged with several of them. ISU, with MD Khan, and with the Nurses and Midwives Association. And all of them accept that we're all on one side. We're on the side of the Nigerian people. And that we're arguing for the same thing. We need to improve the health of the Nigerian population. And that we need to put some of these issues that are legacy issues, lack of trust that has emerged from both sides not behaving necessarily all the time in a good direction. And that message has resonated. Just yesterday, the Medical and Dental Consultants of Association of Nigeria, MD Khan, announced they are suspending their planned strike because we engaged and had a conversation with them. I saw that in the media, and I think it's very commendable. We saw the nurses and midwives who were contemplating going on some industrial action, and they told us that they will not do that again. Now, Johesu, I think, is a very constructive partner. So with that approach, we would go deeper to understand the basis for these conflicts that have been incessant over the last 10 years. Since the commerce and coinheads, all kinds of issues have emerged, all kinds of strikes, counter-strikes. At the end of the day, people want to be respected, want to be treated with dignity, want to be enabled to perform their function as health workers. Now, it's not an easy mess to sort out, I would say. But we are committed, and I know that we have the president's backing, to do our best and agree on those things that are feasible, practical, doable. And for those that we disagree, once the other sides understand that, look, these are issues that are legacy, and we begin to put them aside and actually focus on providing health for Nigerians, I think we will all be better for it. My expectation is that we'll see less and less of that, as we have seen with the MD card, an excellent example of the spirit that we want to bring. Say, let's focus on the Nigerian people and their health and well-being. Our other issues, yes, there's a lot of suffering, but the suffering goes beyond doctors. Teachers are suffering. Even media is suffering. But all those are transitory suffering because the president has a bold vision for transforming the economy. We'll get out of it. Until we do that, let's ensure that we do what is important. While the squabbling has been going on, health outcomes have not improved. People travel to India and other places for medical tourism, and yet we're fighting ourselves. Does it make sense? So with that approach that we're coming to the table with, respect each other. Wherever you are, a health worker, you are valued. To begin to address some of those outstanding issues in a responsible manner. We've promised to earn their trust, and they have also promised to earn our trust. So that government and the health workers are all on the side of the Nigerian people. For sure, the president is on the side of the Nigerian people. He wants to do whatever it is. And so if we take that approach, I think we should see less and less. And even if they are on the fringes, folks that have other agendas, I think the Nigerian people will see through. There's no need for that if you're a health worker. By doing so, we'll earn the respect of Nigerians and the profession, whether you are a nurse, whether you're a pharmacist, whether you're a doctor, no matter how brilliant you are, at the end of the day, you only achieve that fulfillment if you can treat patients, you can help others get to a better health.
Ayo.
You guys, well, Prof, when Chamberlain asked you about insurance, the first word that came to my mind is that many people would rather go for phytomedicine. And it also helps me recall what the DG of NAFDAC said in response to Chamberlain's question in 2020, when we asked then, when at the initial outbreak of COVID-19, that the whole idea was, look, the low-hanging fruit for most Nigerians was phytomedicine, herbal medicine. And we've also been told and seen, reports of even the World Health Organization very much interested in traditional medicine and all of that. Is there a plan to match data or research with the realities of what people generally go for, which is to go for herbal medicine when they cannot reach the orthodox medicine within their budgets?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think there is evidence that many Nigerians go to several providers before they get to the formal healthcare system when they are sick. They go to religious bodies, they go to traditional doctors, they go to herbal doctors to actually get the care. And when they all fail, then they show up in the formal healthcare system. So part of it is we need to enhance the confidence of Nigerians that the services will be there, they'll be treated with respect, and they will have the care that they need within the affordability limits that they have. So that's one part. But the phytomedicine in particular, I think there is a potential in there. And the Director General of the Nigerian Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, NIPRID, Dr. Obinna Adigwe, has done an excellent job in terms of building the basis for us to understand better the resources that we have in the herbal medicine arena. But we need to study them. We need to categorize them. We need to build that body of knowledge so that the phytomedicine, when they come to people, they are safe. NAFDAC is working to understand how best to regulate that so that they are not causing harm. because there may be some phytomedicine products that may cause harm if not applied in the right patients. Take, for instance, somebody who has liver disease, and they take a medicine that can compound their liver condition and tip them into liver failure. So that's the balance that we need to create over time. So it's not either or, but we have to be responsible in protecting, safeguarding the products that our people consume. And that sector itself has to be better regulated so that we don't have charlatans that can prey on the poorest amongst us, promising them remedies that may not necessarily be true or be proven or be safe for them. And that is something that we're going to work on, so that over time, the Western medicine, which is the more formal medicine, because that's a product of colonial experience that we have, is also not at the expense entirely of our domestic indigenous knowledge. There's some value in there. We don't throw that out just because we are going for Western medicine. But we have to do it in a responsible manner, and we have to use sort of good scientific methods to understand what is better, what is not. In Western medicine, there is a process of clinical trials to compare whether something works or it doesn't work, study it to be sure there are no side effects, and whether the placebo effect is not what we are seeing before it is adopted. Now, we need to subject some of this within the system of knowledge that we have, the traditional knowledge system, and see what is it that at least is not doing harm. Because first, we should not do harm.
Well, Prof, it's a long conversation you just started right there, because the people in the villages and in the interior communities are wondering what you're talking about, especially when their realities are right there in their faces. And talking about communities, it brings to mind the issue of primary health centers. I know that my colleagues stated it earlier, but back in 2019, the federal government said it was battling with $10 billion annual infrastructure deficit in the health sector, which at the time amounted to 3.06 trillion naira over quite some time. So it just raises the question of generally, infrastructure generally, but particularly primary health centers. When are we likely to see these PHCs become functional so that Nigerians can stop unnecessarily traveling to tertiary health centers for mere, simple issues such as malaria? Well, even though it's a killer disease, which many people don't even know it is. When is that going to happen? Is there a timeline for that, sir?
So for 20 years, our national health policy has put primary health care as the foundation of our health system. We have 34,000 primary health care centers in this country. All of them are in the purview of states and local governments, and the federal government supports them through the National Primary Health Care Development Agency. And in the last few years, many have been revived to be functional, but less than a quarter of them are truly functional. So there's a scope to expand the infrastructure, the equipment, but importantly, the human resources, the community health workers, the nurses and midwives that are out there, and the medical officers that need to support them, and the referral system. That requires financing. And therefore, in 2024, we're going to work with our legislatures at the federal level, but also hopefully with our state governors and their own state legislatures to appropriate resources to invest in the infrastructure as well in a responsible manner. So the primary healthcare centers are built up, but also where they are existing to be refurbished and to be equipped and have the right health workers. In many local government arenas, which you probably know, they are health workers, but they're not really trained health workers because politicians at the lower level sort of appropriate slots and put in for employment people who may not be trained. Well, that's what we have, and they may need to be retrained. But that requires investments by the states as well. Wherever you see a primary healthcare system being functional, the leadership is at the state government, the State Primary Healthcare Development Agency, the state governor. We would like to see state governors paying attention to the most basic services for their citizens, whether it's immunization, preventing things like diphtheria or measles, or even the type 2 polio that is emerging in some states like Zamfara and Sokoto states, for instance. That the governors pay attention to that, and the federal government supports them, because all the three tiers of government have to work together for the primary healthcare system to be revamped to the level that Nigerians will enjoy it. That hasn't happened as well in the last couple of years. We do hope, and Mr. President is very committed to this direction, that we will work with the state governments We'll work with with the local governments and through the MPHCD and the Federal Ministry of Health, really focus Nigerians on ensuring that as much as possible, we improve sort of a primary healthcare system so that our citizens get the care that they deserve.
All right, Prof, we have several questions from the viewers, but we can only try to take one or half because we were completely out of time on this one. And it's about accident victims dying, because this has defied several governments and directives. What are you going to do to change it? Hospitals accepting accident victims because they claim no reports, no police report, they can't accept them.
Yeah, we will look at that. I think before we came in, there was a National Emergency Medical Services agency that was created, and that was to be financed out of the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund, which was put together through the National Health Act. And we would look at that because we need to have an emergency medical system that is national, but it cannot just be held by the Federal Ministry of Health. It requires many of these hospitals, the 34,000 facilities that we have, only about, I would say about 100 or so in the realm of the federal government direct control. Many of them are in the realm of the state governments and the local governments at primary healthcare centers. So it's a national approach that is needed. And we would be reviewing that as part of our effort to improve health outcomes. So Nigerians suffer from communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, but injuries are also an important part of it. That's on the care side. But on the prevention side, when I mentioned whole of government approach, what the Ministry of Transportation does, building roads, road safety, blood transfusion, those are all elements that are also needed. Perhaps improving the circumstances of our roads alone could prevent many of those accidents from happening. Enforcing by the Federal Road Safety the quality of the drivers, their vision, their use of substances, the speed limits, can reduce many of those injuries so that the few that occur can be attended to. So it's not something that is entirely within the domain of health treatment, yes, on the health institutions, but there is a whole realm of other issues that needed to be addressed as well to prevent this from happening. Drivers themselves being responsible not to drive with tires that are really run down or vehicles that have no brakes. Those kinds of things are important to prevent the accidents from happening. But when they happen, we should have in place the policies like treatment of emergency accident victims. Yeah. We will look at that, and there is some funding, but it's not going to be enough by itself.
Okay. All right. We have to go. We do thank you for coming on, Professor Muhammad Ali Pate, Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare. Thank you for coming in, and all the best to you and your team.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
All right. So that's how far we can go. We do thank you all for watching. We appreciate your sending your messages, but we'll take them tomorrow, hopefully. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain. Also,
I'm Nell Taigbe. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Welcome to a new week. Bye for now.